Hey there, I'm the MadCatster. Am I glad to see you here? Well, we haven't talked about the Logan Paul versus Coffeezilla defamation lawsuit in quite a while. There's been a lot going on with it. They've been filing all kinds of procedural things back and forth. But Coffeezilla is trying to outmaneuver Logan Paul. We're going to talk about it for a few minutes. You know me, I've got the deets and all the receipts, so buckle up and let's go. So I am here with Sibylle Enforcer. She's purring away as always, and she just loves to be with me. She's waiting to go to bed, actually. But anyways, we haven't talked about Logan Paul and his defamation lawsuit against Coffeezilla, and the whole thing with the Cryptozoo stuff that was going on, and Coffeezilla and Logan Paul got involved in this feud, and basically Logan Paul was accusing Coffeezilla of defaming him, but Coffeezilla seemed to have done his research, in my opinion, and seemed to have all his ducks in a row. But we're going to take a look now at what Coffeezilla filed with the court. He's trying to get the upper hand in this lawsuit. It's pretty interesting, and we're going to talk about it right now. I'd like to thank the sponsor of this video, Midas Merge. I've been playing Midas Merge on my phone now for a couple of weeks, and let me tell you, it is addicting. When you dive into the world of Midas Merge, you hatch and merge to create the most adorable, cutest creatures you've ever seen, right on your phone. My favorite is the Cappy Bird, which starts as a baby and evolves into a level 3 creature. You won't be able to resist these things. In Midas Merge, you team up with King Midas and Queen Leah, who are trying to revive their gardens of gold, which have been placed under a spell of darkness by Nyx, the goddess of night. Discover Nyx's mystery as you merge Sunburst to brighten the gardens and free their cute and adorable inhabitants. And what's great is Midas Merge is free to download, and you don't need to have Wi-Fi, so you can play it on your phone anytime, anywhere. You can delve into the world of these incredible, cute creatures. Plus, you get an ad-free experience with no dead ends, which means you're constantly exploring and merging without interruption. It's pure merging joy on your own schedule. I've been playing it even at night when I go to bed. Plus, right now on weekends through May 26th, they've added in a special garden called the Haunted Gardens. You get to wander through there and unlock spooky, scary, yet adorable creatures, which you can bring back to your Sapphire Sanctuary. Spin for creepy rewards, merge your way through the fog, and uncover adorable and a little spooky surprises. Be among the first 100 to install via my link in the description down below or the QR code, and you will get a very spooky black cat who looks a lot like my Edith and Mary. This ultra cute creature boosts your garden progress and will be personalized with my channel name. I have to tell you how much I absolutely love Midas Merge. Like I said, I've been playing it now for a couple of weeks. It's a fun, relaxing game filled with the cutest creatures. Seriously, it's, like I said, it's very addicting. It's fun to play. It'll pass the time like you won't believe. And once you start, you won't want to put it down. So join me, dive in, click the link below, scan the QR code, be one of the first 100 to install now. Get that spooky black cat, especially for the MadCatster channel viewers. And thank you so much, Midas Merge, for sponsoring this video. So here is what Coffeezilla has filed. His attorneys have filed what's called a defendant's motion to transfer and stay proceedings. And it says defendants Stephen Findyson, who is Coffeezilla, and Coffee Break Productions LLC, DBA Coffeezilla, bring this motion to transfer and stay proceedings and in support respectfully show. And so this is what he's trying to do. So it talks about here that in 2023, I think this has to do with the lawsuit that was filed against Coffeezilla. It says around the same time, investors in the failed project, the whole Cryptozoo stuff, brought a class action lawsuit against Paul, Don Holland versus Cryptozoo Inc. et al. And it was filed in the Western District of Texas, which is the same district that this court is in, except that is in the Austin division, whereas this is in the San Antonio division. And that plays into what we're going to talk about in a second. Unable to obtain discovery, with the Holland case effectively stayed while the court considered motions to dismiss, Paul strategically filed this lawsuit against Coffeezilla to punish the reporter who helped to uncover his cryptocurrency scam, and they're saying it right out loud in this motion, and gain discovery to defend himself in the pending Holland case, the class action civil proceedings. So what he's alleging here is that part of the reason he filed this lawsuit against Coffeezilla was to get a hold of information and documents in Coffeezilla's possession that he might be able to use to defend himself in the class action lawsuit. It goes on to say, Although this is a defamation suit, truth is an absolute defense. It certainly is. Accordingly, the issues in this case are nearly identical to the issues in the Holland case, i.e. whether and to what extent Cryptozoo was a scam and the scope of Paul's culpability in developing and promoting it. Accordingly, as the second filed suit, this case should be transferred to the Austin division for further consideration. And then we're not going to go over the background. You guys know the whole story. They came up with this Cryptozoo game, and they had NFTs, and you supposedly were going to hatch and create all these unique creatures, and the game was delayed, and then it basically never happened. And then with the cryptocurrency that was also involved with this project, Coffeezilla did a whole expose, a series of them actually, talking about how he believed, based on what he had found, that this was a scam. And of course, Logan Paul didn't like that. He doesn't like to be called a scammer, so he filed this lawsuit saying that Coffeezilla had defamed him. How much harm could Coffeezilla have done to Logan Paul's already tarnished image? And so there's all this in the background is all redacted. I have no idea why, but let's get to this part now. The Holland lawsuit. John Holland, on behalf of himself and others similarly situated, filed a class action lawsuit against Cryptozoo, Inc., Paul, and several of Paul's associates, alleging fraud, breach of contract, unjust enrichment, violations of the Texas Deceptive Trade Practices Act, negligence, fraudulent misrepresentation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The Holland plaintiffs include individuals and entities who purchased Zoo tokens, that's the cryptocurrency that went along with this game, or Cryptozoo non-fungible token from June 11, 2021 through February 2nd, 2023. In May 2023, Danielle Strobel, Paul's longtime assistant, Jeffrey Levin, Paul's manager, and Ophir Bentov, the community manager of the Cryptozoo project, all filed motions to dismiss the class action, alleging the court lacks personal jurisdiction. Again, we're not going to cover like a lot of this stuff because we're going to focus on what Coffeezilla's motion is about. But they go on to talk about the statements and the things that Logan Paul did that they're alleging in this Holland lawsuit. And Coffeezilla's taken like excerpts of the lawsuit and posted them here to bolster what he's trying to explain. And then we'll skip down here. Paul, however, wanted to take matters into his own hands to obtain discovery. So after the suit was filed, the motions to dismiss were filed. The court apparently hasn't acted on them as of the filing of this motion, and discovery has been effectively stayed while the motions are pending, which is normal. Because if it gets dismissed, the class action lawsuit, what's the point of doing discovery, right? So you don't want to waste time doing that until you find out whether the motions to dismiss are going to be defeated. Paul, however, wanted to take matters into his own hands to obtain discovery. Before Paul filed this suit against Coffeezilla, he admitted in a pleading in the Holland case that he intended to obtain discovery from Coffeezilla. So that's interesting. So I don't think Logan Paul, in my opinion, personally, is the brightest bulb in the pack, but you shouldn't really be giving away your strategy like that because it doesn't look that good. Now Coffeezilla is using it as ammunition, obviously. He basically said that he was going to try to get discovery, and so what Coffeezilla is saying is, well, he filed this lawsuit against me, Coffeezilla, to try and get discovery out of me that he's then going to turn around and use in the other lawsuit. Discovery will be further delayed pursuant to the requirements of the PSLRA. Nevertheless, if discovery does commence in this case, Mr. Paul intends to seek third-party discovery from Coffeezilla on an expedited basis. Obviously, he wants it as fast as possible to use it, with specific regard to his communications with plaintiff's counsel and potential violations of this court's local rules. The defamation lawsuit. So ultimately, Paul decided to avoid the hurdles of obtaining permission to conduct third-party discovery in the Holland case and instead filed this suit against Coffeezilla. Paul promptly sought the very discovery he identified in the Holland case. So he asked Coffeezilla right away for discovery and was asking for stuff that he, according to Coffeezilla, clearly was going to need to use in the other case. And that's part of what Coffeezilla is using to bolster his argument of why these cases should be in the same court, because of their similarities. It says this workaround served other goals. For example, Paul was able to obtain Coffeezilla's communications with the government. Paul is also using this lawsuit to punish Coffeezilla, whom Paul perceives as his online nemesis, which is totally ridiculous. I mean, if you guys watch Coffeezilla, I love his stuff, but it's not like he's this big comic book villain. And make him a cautionary tale to other critics. So, it's lawfare. Logan Paul is trying to silence his critics and detractors by scaring them into thinking that if they say anything bad about him, he's going to sue them, which, rightly or wrongly, of course, will tie them up and cost them money. Paul's own messages with friends and associates explicitly confirm his motive. And then there's messages that he exchanged, and we've talked about this in the other video I did about this, where he basically talks about how he wants to get vengeance or revenge against Coffeezilla, even though it may not be a strong case. He wants to basically make him pay. And then here it says, Paul also admitted he wants to make sure Coffeezilla pays for his reporting about Paul. Zilla will pay one way or another. I'll make sure of it. Logan Paul's the one who sounds like the comic book villain. When Paul's friends tried to talk him off the ledge, stating, bro, you're a billionaire, basically meaning, why are you doing this? What's the point? Paul responded that he's a petty billionaire. Well, at least he's self-aware. Paul also acknowledges Coffeezilla would have a difficult time paying any alleged damages. Paul admitted he just wants to make Coffeezilla suffer, along with anyone else he feels has wronged him. That sounds like somebody else prominent that I know who likes to file lawsuits to get revenge against people that they don't like. Okay, we're going to skip ahead. So now we're getting back to this Coffeezilla lawsuit. And Coffeezilla says, among other defenses, Coffeezilla asserts truth as an absolute defense to the defamation claim. In summary, this suit and the Holland suit involve the same Logan Paul scam, the same allegations regarding Paul's involvement, and much of the same witnesses and evidence. The cases therefore satisfy the first to file rule because they substantially overlap, and the court should transfer this case to the Austin Division. And now they're going to talk about what this first to file rule is. The Fifth Circuit, where these two lawsuits are, follows the long-standing first to file rule, which provides that where two cases involve substantially similar issues, the court in which the first case was filed is the appropriate court to determine whether and how the second filed case should proceed. The first to file rule is grounded in principles of comity and sound judicial administration. Comity requires courts of coordinate jurisdiction and equal rank, which these two are in the same jurisdiction, same district, and they're obviously equal because they're both federal district courts, to exercise care to avoid interference with each other's affairs. The first to file rule seeks to avoid the waste caused by duplication, avoid rulings that may run afoul of sister courts, and avoid piecemeal resolution of issues that call for uniform results. The first to file rule can be applied where related cases have been filed in different districts or where, as here, related cases are pending before two judges in the same district. First to file rule procedure. When related cases are pending before two federal courts, the court in which the case was last filed may refuse to hear it if the issues raised by the case substantially overlap. Although the first to file rule is discretionary, courts in this district often apply it when two cases substantially overlap. So basically it's saying both lawsuits are dealing with accusations that Logan Paul was scamming people and that his Cryptozoo thing was a scam. And you're going to see in a minute that a lot of the discovering witnesses are also similar. The first file rule consists of two steps. First, the court in which the second filed case determines whether there is a likelihood of substantial overlap between the first filed and second filed cases. Second, if there is a likelihood substantial overlap exists, the court in which the second filed case is pending transfers it to the court in which the first filed case is pending to determine whether the second filed case should be dismissed, stayed, or transferred and consolidated. Let's see a little bit more of what he's saying. I don't know whether he's trying to get creative with this motion or whether this is something that's legitimately going to be considered by the court. I haven't dealt with any cases before that try to apply this first to file rule, so let's see what else he has to say. The first to file rule applies here because a likelihood of substantial overlap exists between this case and the Holland case. Application of the first to file rule is appropriate here because it would be inefficient for two courts to determine whether Paul scammed investors in his Cryptozoo project. So basically what he's saying is both cases involve the question of whether or not Logan Paul scammed the people that participated in the Cryptozoo and the crypto token thing. And insofar as that issue is concerned, yes, they're dealing with the same subject matter. To determine whether substantial overlap exists, the court should consider whether the core issues in both cases are the same and whether much of the proof adduced would likely be identical. The cases and the parties involved need not be identical for substantial overlap to be present. Where cases and parties are not identical, the court should consider overlap of the substantive issues, likelihood of conflict between the cases, and the comparative advantage and interest of each forum in resolving the dispute. The core issue in both the Holland case and this case is whether Paul scammed his fans by promoting his Cryptozoo project and enticing fans to purchase Zoo tokens and Cryptozoo NFTs. Because the allegations and issues in the Holland case and this case are so similar, there is a substantial likelihood of conflict between the cases. Further, the Holland plaintiffs and Coffeezilla will have to prove the same facts to succeed on their respective claims and affirmative defense of truth. Finally, Paul and Coffeezilla together have identified every Holland plaintiff and defendant as a potential witness in this case, and subpoenas have been issued to several defendants in the Holland case. In fact, Paul subpoenaed the Holland plaintiff's lawyer in this suit. The overlap of witnesses and discovery between the two cases demonstrates, at a minimum, a likelihood of substantial overlap between the two cases. Accordingly, because a likelihood substantial overlap exists between this case and the Holland case, the first to file rule should apply. This court should stay this case pending the ruling on whether a likelihood of substantial overlap exists. And that makes sense, because they've been filing a whole bunch of procedural things, and Logan Paul keeps trying to compel Coffeezilla to reveal certain things. And so it's kind of gotten a little messy, but it makes sense to stay it. Obviously, if the court's going to consider this motion and consider whether this first to file rule applies, they should stay the proceedings. There's no point in spending more time and resources until they figure out whether or not it's going to apply. The court has inherent power to control its own docket, including the power to stay or abate proceedings. Whereas here, a party has invoked the first to file rule, the Fifth Circuit has endorsed a stay to permit the court of first filing to rule on the motion to transfer. Fifth Circuit being where these cases are. A stay is warranted here because Paul is using this case to punish Coffeezilla for his reporting. Even Paul acknowledges a defamation suit like this one will hurt Coffeezilla financially. And we know Logan Paul's not doing it because he wants money from Coffeezilla. Clearly he's doing it to try to hurt and wreck Coffeezilla. Further, Paul filed another motion to compel this week, which will require Coffeezilla to spend additional resources briefing a response, and this court will need to spend additional resources ruling on the same. And so what they're saying is, let's not keep going down that path until we figure this issue out. So evaluating the interests of the parties and judicial resources, staying these proceedings pending the court's determination as to whether a likelihood of substantial overlap exists between the two cases is the equitable solution. For these reasons, defendants respectfully request that the court grant this motion, transfer this case to the Austin Division so the Holland court can decide whether it should be abated or consolidated, stay this case in this court pending the ruling on whether a likelihood of substantial overlap exists, and award defendants all other relief at law or in equity to which they are entitled. Of course, Logan Paul opposed this motion. I'm not going to go over that, but I am going to read a little bit from what Coffeezilla had to say in response to Logan Paul's opposition. Here it is. Defendants reply in support of motion to transfer and stay proceedings. Defendants Stephen Findyson and Coffee Break Productions LLC, DBA Coffeezilla, file this reply in support of their motion to transfer and stay proceeding, and in support would respectfully show courts within this district and the Fifth Circuit consistently apply the first to file rule where a likelihood of substantial overlap exists between the two cases. Instead of addressing the undisputed overlap between this case and the Holland case, Paul dedicated his response to half-truths and misleading statements about the ongoing government investigations of him and Cryptozoo, and we'll get to that in a second. Arguments that are more appropriate for the Holland court to consider after transfer, and complaints that discovery has already occurred, even though Paul opposed Coffeezilla's motion to stay discovery. So Coffeezilla wanted to stay the discovery. Logan Paul didn't want to stay the discovery. And now Logan Paul's complaining that the discovery got done as he wanted it to, which, okay. Given the likelihood of overlap of Paul's failure to establish compelling circumstances to avoid transfer, the court should grant defendant's motion and transfer the case to the Holland court for further proceedings. And then there's a couple of interesting things here that I just highlighted. Here's the response. Logan Paul did a background section in his opposition. And it says, with little reverence for the government's investigatory competence, Paul blames Coffeezilla for the opening of 3 government investigations by at least 2 different agencies by claiming Coffeezilla failed to provide allegedly exonerating information to the government. In fact, it is Paul who has omitted information. For example, Paul's inaccurate, misleading timeline omits the following. And then they go through stuff where Coffeezilla made some contact with an FBI agent and talking about Logan Paul and his manager and the whole mess. And Coffeezilla submitting an initial whistleblower report to the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission. And Paul receives a subpoena to testify regarding Cryptozoo before a grand jury in the Eastern District of New York. So in February of 2023, the Eastern District of New York took up a case against Logan Paul. And you can see here's a couple of slides of the Eastern District of New York grand jury investigation. So there was a grand jury investigation in the Eastern District of New York, and then it says here, upon demonstration of probable cause that a crime had been committed, the Central District of California issued an amended search warrant for Paul's electronic devices for evidence of securities fraud. So clearly, the various agencies believe that Paul may have committed securities fraud, and he's blaming Coffeezilla for this. You can't blame other people for your misdeeds just because they uncovered them. The real question is, why are you doing this? Not, oh my God, I got caught. So securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy related to Cryptozoo. And there's a slide about the search warrant. And then the SEC subpoenaed Paul for information regarding Cryptozoo and other crypto token scams Paul has been involved with, including Dink Doink, if you guys remember that. And that was in March of 2023. It says, thus, by the spring of 2023, Coffeezilla has received a formal request for documents from the SEC regarding 2 of Paul's cryptocurrency projects, Dink Doink and Cryptozoo, and is aware of an FBI investigation into the same projects. He's also aware that a class action securities fraud case has been filed against Paul. And so, with the evidence that Coffeezilla had, he went on to do his expose. And then they respond to a couple of things, and I'm skipping over a lot of this because we don't need to go over it. Paul's attempt to establish a compelling circumstance is unpersuasive. Although the court may disregard the first to file rule when compelling circumstances exist, Paul has not and cannot show facts to support a compelling circumstances. Paul argues that there are significant procedural differences between this case and the Holland litigation, but significant procedural differences is not a compelling circumstance recognized by the Fifth Circuit or any district courts within the Fifth Circuit. Procedural differences are also irrelevant at this stage because the first filed court is not required to consolidate this case into the Holland case. So what he's saying is the court's option, the Austin court in the 5th District, is not just to consolidate the cases. So if there are procedural differences that will prevent them from getting consolidated, then there are other options that he talked about that are available in terms of how they deal with these under the first to file rule. Procedural differences are also irrelevant at this stage because the first filed court is not required to consolidate this case into the Holland case, but it may certainly consider those differences in deciding whether to abate or consolidate. Paul also argues that this case has developed further than the Holland litigation, but Paul only cites, and this is interesting, this shows how weak Paul's response was, but Paul only cites 2 out-of-circuit cases, one from the Eastern District of New York and the other from the Northern District of California, and no binding authority to support his proposition. If you're going to file an opposition like Logan Paul did, and you're going to make an argument as to why the motion shouldn't be granted, you want to really cite to cases in the 5th District where this case is, because that's going to have binding authority on the court, because it's the district's own decisions. The fact that he went out of state to 2 different states to pull case law that he thinks bolsters his argument of why the motion should be denied shows that his argument's really weak, because he couldn't find anything in the 5th District to support what he's trying to say. Paul also claims transferring and staying this case would unduly delay resolution. It's been going on since 2023. But again, Paul fails to cite to any authority supporting this proposition, much less any evidence of this claimed prejudice. So, I mean, that's a bad sign. That's totally a weak argument. And so he says that based on the fact that Logan Paul didn't give enough sound reasoning in his opposition for why the motion should be denied, it says, for these reasons, Coffeezilla respectfully requests that the court grant its motion, transfer this case to the Austin Division so the Holland court can decide whether it should be abated or consolidated. stay this case in this court pending the ruling on whether a likelihood of substantial overlap exists and award Coffeezilla other relief at law or equity to which they are entitled. So I'm going to really be interested, because I haven't dealt with this issue before, to see what happens with this. I'm guessing that the San Antonio court in the 5th District, where the Coffeezilla case is, may go ahead and let the other court decide this motion, just to see where that's going to go. I don't know if it's going to be successful or not. I mean, I totally agree that there's a commonality in witnesses and evidence, and the fact that both cases are dealing with the question of whether or not Paul scammed people with his Cryptozoo and Zoo token project. I don't know whether the court is going to accept Coffeezilla's arguments or not, but I really will be interested to see what the court does, you know. I hope they do send it over to the Holland court, because I would like to see what the court says and what its opinion says as to why they will or will not grant this motion. So let me know what you think down below. I haven't really been covering this case, so there wasn't a whole lot of anything really interesting going on. I thought this was interesting, so I'm covering this now, and of course we'll update you as to what happens with this. I'll be fascinated to see what happens with this. But you let me know what you think down below. I still have my video to put up about the TikTok psychic coming for me, and I am going to put that up, so fear not. It's coming. It should be the next video. But I wanted to get this one up because this is more timely than me ranting about the TikTok psychic coming after me and calling me names. But anyways, let me know what you think down below. Like and subscribe, please, you guys. Sybil says, please like and subscribe. We appreciate you. I don't have anybody to thank today for the Amazon wish list or the Buy Me a Coffee, but of course, as always, thank you so much to the Patreon patrons. I've started making videos available early to the Patreon patrons, like a day before, so they can view the videos before they go public. And I will continue that. I'm not doing that with this video because I have to go down south to drive my mom to my sister and brother-in-law have a beach house down in Georgia, and we're going to go down there for a couple days. She's bringing her dog down because my sister, as a lot of you know, runs a big dog and cat rescue that she totally dedicates her life to and doesn't get a salary or anything, and has saved thousands of animals over the years and gets donations of food from like Chewy and the big chains. She has a warehouse that she puts all this stuff that they send her in, and she distributes it to other smaller rescues who are desperately in need of food and other supplies for the animals that they are saving. So my mother's taking her dog down because her dog has something on its eye, and my sister's vet is going to take care of it, and we can't obviously fly, so we're driving down, and then I'm going to fly back. So I'm just trying to get this up because I have to leave tomorrow, so I'm not going to do the day early thing, but I will do it for subsequent videos. So if you want to have the early access, you want to help the cats, check out the Patreon link down below. Thank you so much, you guys, the Patreon patrons. You guys are so awesome. We love you guys. You guys have been such great support over these last 4 years. It'll be in July that I've been doing this. It's amazing. And thank you so much to the channel members. You guys, thank you so much. All of the support that you guys give us is amazing. The cats appreciate it. I appreciate it. I'm going to get that video about the TikTok psychic up right after I get back from Memorial Day weekend. And in the interim, take care of yourselves, love one another, and I will see you in the next one.
Pretty please. Subscribe, like, and hit the bell. I get a treat for every new sub. Thank you.